My name is Donald Roy Campbell. The year I was born is 1951. I was born in Jamaica in a parish called St. Thomas, in a district called Maley. And I was brought up there until the age of 13. So my previous years before that was my daddy left us when I was 4. My mother left us when I was 7. When I say us, I had 4 other siblings, 2 brothers, 2 sisters, and I'm the middle of the lot. So my formative years was growing up in Jamaica, going to school from junior school up to secondary school. And then I left Jamaica once my parents sent for me to join them in Birmingham, England. That was quite an experience. But before that, it was even more of an experience without your family. Not knowing when you're going to see mom or dad again. And I was very, very much attached to my mother, you know. So I spent all the years thinking, when am I going to see them again? So when I got notification that I was going to see my parents again, that was just fantastic. And I left, and nobody told me about the journey I was going to go. All I know, I was going to go and travel in a big iron bird. That's what we called them at the time, an iron bird. So I traveled in this big iron bird, taking off from Kingston, Jamaica, staging through Washington, D.C., and that was 25th of February, 1965. I remember it well because being dressed as a Caribbean youth in short sleeve, shorts, short sleeve shirt and shorts. I landed in Washington, D.C., and it was minus temperature. Now, prior to leaving Jamaica, somebody said, it's going to be cold in England, you know. When I go, cold, I'm a man. I know what cold is, I can stand it. That's somebody who'd never, ever experienced anything below 70 degrees Fahrenheit. But I thought I knew until I landed in Washington, D.C. and experienced that. It was amazing. However, it was brief, but I then left from Washington, D.C. to Heathrow Airport. So we landed at 1:30, 1965 in February. We then drove from Heathrow Airport all the way up to Birmingham. And during that time, I kept seeing this white thing on the ground, and I'm thinking, what is that? So I said to my mother, what is that white thing on the ground there? And she said, it's snow. I said, snow? What is that? And she said, you know, I said, where's it come from then? She said, out the sky. And I said, no, it's only rain comes from out the sky, because it wasn't snowing at the time, but it was everywhere. And that was my first experience of snow. We arrived in Birmingham, and it then snowed 3 weeks, night and day. And I kind of fell in love with it in a way, because it was like, you get up in the morning or last thing at night, and you would see this trickle of snow, and it would vary with snowflakes. And I've got a musical mind, so it's like watching the snowflakes coming down and I'm interpreting it to music in my head. So it was fascinating watching it. But what it then did was just fill the streets everywhere. And therefore vehicles had a problem driving and all that sort of thing. So going on, and some kids learned that there was a new kid on the block. They wanted me to come out and play. So I then went outside in my slippers, in the snow, not knowing anything about snow. And in no time, my feet were frozen. And I'm thinking, what is this sensation of my feet? So I then went back inside and stuck them on the paraffin heater, which was the wrong thing to do, because these things are called chilblain. I'm learning new words now. You'll catch chilblain and all that, which I did. So those formative years, my first experience from Jamaica to that point was absolutely amazing. Then I went to school. And going to school, again, was another cultural change. So not only was I coping now with the weather, going to school in the snow, on blizzards in some cases, I was going to school mixed with a variety of different ethnic backgrounds. Now, if I say to you I didn't see a white person until I was 12, you probably think, wow, but I didn't. So now I was in school mixed with a whole lot of different faces, mainly of white and Asians and Africans and Caribbeans. But I then noted that most of the people in my class was of people from another country. So that was my experience. And then starting to learn about what this class was about, I'm thinking, why are we just doing this particular lesson? Because I'd done it quite a long time back in Jamaica. But people looked at me as if I knew nothing and treated me in that way. I didn't necessarily find out what I was capable of doing, but I then realized that they just put you in a class with mixed with a lot of people, different abilities in terms of language skills, in terms of understanding it, speaking it, and all this. It was just a class. And I just carried on because you've got to. When it comes to the last year of my schooling, when I was walking in the corridor and I heard this teacher said, "What are we going to do with them?" And he was referring to our class. And the other one said, "Let's make up a class and call it 4X. So having heard that, I'm thinking, wow, what's really going to happen to my last year at school? It meant I had no formative qualification. I then had to navigate my life from then. My life from then, let's go back a bit. Prior to leaving school, I said to my teacher one day, "I would like to join the military." And he said to me, "Which one?" I said, "What do you mean, which one?" Because I didn't know there was a difference between the Royal Navy, the Army, and the Royal Air Force. He says, "There are three." And I said, "Okay." So he said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll send you down to, in my case, Broad Street in Birmingham, where you had all the careers offices, career information offices." And I went to the Navy, and I didn't quite like the attitude of this particular petty officer, big tash and all that, just Lottie, and all that sort of thing. And in the end, I just said to him, "Look, I don't like the sea anyway, so the Navy's not for me." And subconsciously, I ruled out the Army. I just didn't think the Army was for me. And I went to the Royal Air Force Careers Office. And honestly, from that time onwards, it was just the thing for me. And of course, you have to go through the various aptitude tests to see how you fit in, where you fit in. So fortunately for me, I heard the gentleman said a trade that I'd like, and it was emergency, working with an aircraft and aircrew. And the fact that he mentioned working with aircraft and traveling, that was it for me. Because what I wanted to do, growing up in a conurbation like Birmingham with lots of high-rise flats and lots of vehicles, I didn't see too much of the world. And in my mind's eye, I wanted to see the world. So when he mentioned that you'd be working with aircraft and traveling, I immediately gravitated to that particular job, which what they call nowadays is survival equipment technician. Yes, that was a good question. That is a good question because when I left school, for the first year, I worked as a machine engineer, which meant I was making drain pipe rods, those things you put up and clean your chimney, but I had to make them from scratch. So I got into machine engineering and learned to take various bits and pieces, put them together, and make those things work. So I really enjoyed that very much. And I did that for about a year, 18 months. So I joined the Air Force when I was 18. Yes, that is really a good question especially for people who are born in the Caribbean, because being in Jamaica, in where I come from in Jamaica, and it happens to a lot of other people, your schooling was very much based around the British system. So I can tell you that I knew more about Britain than I knew about Jamaica. I could draw the map of Britain. Yeah. And how we looked at, say, England was mother country. We even have the famous saying that the streets were paved with gold. So if we had toys, and in my case, marbles that came from England, it superseded every other marble I had, wherever they came from, because it came from England. Toys and everything. So your mental belief, attitude towards England was the mother country. It was the place to be. So, but coming to England, you see a different element of all of that. Obviously, some good, some bad. I spoke about the weather. That was definitely a bad, because I left the sunshine where I never, ever owned a coat or a jumper in all my 13 years. And I came here and I had to be wrapped up in all that, minus temperature. So that was quite a change. But the other change is some people's attitude towards me. I'm just walking past people's house and they were like, I could see the curtain shift. And when I look, people would point to their nose because I'm looking at them saying that I'm being nosy. So I didn't even know what that term meant. So I said to my mother, why are they doing that? Pointing to their nose. And mother said, take no notice of them. It's because of you are and the color of the skin why they're behaving like that. But I didn't understand it because I've never experienced that kind of, if you like, prejudice before. That was a new beginning. So those are contrasting things. The weather, people's attitude. But as a child, as a young lad, I was very, very robust in terms of the way I saw life. You know, I very positive and always want to grab it by the scruff of the neck. So I thought, you know, let's get on with it. So going to school, I was like the rough and tumble boy that a lot of the guys are in school, and that's just how I saw the differences, really. Good. That's a very good question, because this has happened to thousands of people, and it turned out to be good, bad, and indifferent. In my case, myself and my older brother, we went to our godparents. My other siblings went elsewhere, so we all went to different uncles and aunts or friends, you know. So I was with my godparents, and they were loving people. We had other boys. Their kids in that. So we all grew up together as virtually as one. It's almost no different. So I was very fortunate to be able to do that. The second part of your question is, how did the reunion go? Now, I know that this can be very different. I remember my mother very well. So when I met her again at 13, even though that was 5 years difference, it was just a fantastic reunion, because I was just so much of a, you could call it a mommy's boy, but I just love my mother. So when I met her again, after all those years, the reunion and the connection, the bonding was almost like it was never broken. Doesn't happen for everybody, because I've seen different and I know different and I've been told different. So that was great. I can only speak for myself. My other siblings, I think they would probably say the same thing. But I know other families who've been very different. Yes, that is quite a good question, again, in the sense that my father was a very quiet, whereas my mother was a matriarch. My father was a quiet person, very much opposite to my character. I really wanted my father to be more of a man's man, so to speak, but he was very quiet, and that's just how he was. So he was just there as a person, you know. So there was no detachment, no connection, no real you know. But with my mother, she just ran everything, and you know, the connection was fully there. Yes, I was aware of Jamaican independence because my school sort of everywhere stopped, including my school, for this day, 6th of August, I think it was 1962. Yeah, and it was very special in a lot of ways because everybody came out to celebrate. So my school had a party, if you like, and all the school children went in there and joined in. And I thought I was, I thought I was a what you call a big man. So when I saw all these men doing what they were doing at this party, because it was Independence Day, everybody was drinking, and the men was like having a beer and smoking a cigarette. I thought, well, I'm a big man. Now let's try that. But once I tried a cigarette and I just drank some beer, I didn't like the way I felt, so I kept away from that. But that was very much a stuck out sort of time, date, and everything stamped in my mind as Independence Day. Well, coming into the RAF as from a civilian, young lad, 18, was quite a difference. It was a difference that I wanted to embrace, but the difference was kind of more than I expected. I didn't even know what to expect because I'd never experienced military life. Some people had joined like the cadets, the air training corps before that, so they experienced that from a young age. But I didn't. I was a raw recruit. I came in and I just joined. I came off. I remember getting the date and they said, you've got to go on the train to, in this case, Newark up in Lincolnshire. And then somebody would meet you there, and it was this lanky corporal with a tash saying, right, you horrible lot. And I'm thinking, what? I don't even know you. You start calling me names. That's how I felt at the time. And that's where it started. So we got on this bus and, you know, went off to Swindon for 6 weeks, learning to march. Not just learning to march, but you learn the culture of the Royal Air Force. I say the Royal Air Force because it kind of depends. The Army is different, the Navy is different. So that 6 weeks is a really ingrained marching, saluting, rifle training, all these different things. And you are tested, you're very much tested, inoculated because you get all the inoculations and you're not expecting that. And some people fainted because they're just not used to that sort of world. So that change was quite significant at whatever age that you join. So most of us were around about 18, and that was the first time we'd left home and put into that kind of scenario. So my RF career began, as I said, that 6-week training at Swindon in Lincolnshire. And then from there, everybody would split up into different areas of the country, depending on what career path in terms of your profession, whether engineer or catering or whatever. So as my trade, I was sent to Royal Air Force in Athens in Wales, because that's where the training was done. And my schooling, I think, was about 5 or 6 month straight schooling to become a survival equipment fitter, basic. So once you graduate from there, you then go out in the big wide world, once you graduate from training. Now, saying that, back in my day, there were 12 of us in the class, most of us men, male, other half were female. So it was a good mix. But then you would put in what you call your dream sheet. You dream about going certain places, but it's just a dream, you wouldn't get it. 9 times out of 10, you wouldn't get it. So I wanted to go to Lincolnshire and all these places surrounded by the Midlands, sort of thing. And I remember sitting in the classroom and we're all given our postings, as they call it. And he said to this lad who we'd been together, he was from Stoke, but Stoke used to come to Birmingham to be attested for the Air Force. So we've been together from then. We did all our training, 6 weeks, and we went on the course. We're still together. And he said to this lad, you go into Ballykelly. And everybody's ears, including mine, went. So I said, you know, being the big mouth, excuse me, where's Ballykelly? And he goes, it's Northern Ireland. I goes, where's Northern Ireland? So, and I was just laughing at my mate. And he goes, I don't know what you're laughing at, Campbell. You're with him. So that smile was wiped from my face immediately because I'm thinking, Northern Ireland. Wow. At that time, nobody told us about the conflict that was going on in Northern Ireland. I can't recall even seeing it on the TV or knowing anything about it. And all we got told is that we're going to Northern Ireland. So then back in those days, you had to go and get what they call the warrant so you can travel free on the train. And that's what we did. And you just have to grow up very quickly and get yourself sorted. So we found out what to do, where to go. We found ourselves on the overnight ferry going to Northern Ireland. And we did about 7 hours on the ferry, which is pretty rough on the Irish Sea, I can tell you. And we got off to the other side in Belfast. And all of a sudden, we just stood in the middle, you know, right on the docks in Belfast. And I'm thinking, why are these soldiers lying on the ground with rifles? And this was quite an eye-opener for us because we knew nothing about the conflict that's going on there, the unrest. And these soldiers were like, obviously guarding us coming off because most of us coming off there were soldiers, airmen, and Navy. So we found out that the train station, which is what we had to get, was across the middle of Belfast. So we had to walk through the middle of Belfast to the other side, got on the train, and the train was about 2 hours to 1 hour drive up to Ballykelly. And we got there, and my boss that I was going to meet didn't even know we were coming. So we got to Ballykelly, and we started living in Northern Ireland. Now, when I say living in Northern Ireland, that's quite something. Because when you say you want to join and travel, and it hits you square between the eyes, just like that, very quickly, you have to then wake up very quickly and learn. What do I mean by that? I got to Northern Ireland, and 3 days later, they said, right, you are now going to go on guard duty. Before you go on guard duty, you have to go on the range, and you're given 30 rounds. Those 30 rounds must count. You have to tell us that you will be able to shoot the enemy. So you have to get certain targets. If you didn't qualify, you would not get a rifle. So, me being me, don't want to fail, I made sure that I got the target, all right? And then I went on the guard duty. 2 o'clock in the morning, my sergeant said, right, young man, you're going on guard duty now. And I'm thinking, wow. Because you're starting to hear about this fighting and bombing and people. And he said, okay, so I got all dressed up in my camouflage, and he gave me the rifle and gave me 30 rounds. And I put the rounds in my pocket, because them days you weren't allowed to put them on. And he just dropped me at the end of the camp. He says, right, I'll see you in 2 hours. That is quite a rude awakening. When you live in Birmingham, and you're there, and you've got cars and buses and everything, and all of a sudden, 2 in the morning, you're right in Northern Ireland, and you're by yourself, just the moon shining if you're lucky, you're on your own. You really start to think now, because what happened next? What if the enemy comes? So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I heard, I'm thinking, what's that? So and I heard the noise again. So you're trained to react. So I'm going, who goes there? And I heard nothing. And eventually I saw a pair of eyes looking at me. And it was a cow. Now I was never so glad to see a cow in my life. Because like, what do you do if the enemy comes at you? What do you do? You know? And those are the things that you face when you go out in those kind of situations all the time. And Northern Ireland was very, what shall I say, as a young black boy, and I'm going to say it that way because driving down the street, walking down the street, whatever you do, the people were like staring at you so much because they hadn't confronted, most of them had not seen a black person close up. But it wasn't of scorn in any way. They were like saying, people came up to me and said, why are you here? And I said, what do you mean? He says, we have a fight with the Englishman, not you, because we've got the same history in life. I'm thinking, how can you have the same history? Because I knew nothing about history, right? Then I learned later about no dogs, no blacks, no Irish, all that sort of thing. I learned later. But when they were saying it to me, I didn't know. Also, what I learned later is that the Irish themselves became indentured slaves and sent across the world, especially the Caribbean. So I knew none of that. So when they were saying all that to me, that we had similar background, I had no idea what they were talking about. So my life in Northern Ireland was really good because they saw me as comrade. And it was very comforting. And a striking example is going, and I always say this to people, it probably don't sound much to you, but going to a chip shop outside the camp, there's about 10 people in front of me, and they call me to the front and serve me first. Now, that's quite the opposite that I'd experienced in other parts of England. You get to the back. So that's how much they kind of embraced me. That's how I felt. And I did a year in Northern Ireland. But it was really good because although the conflict was going on, we were just lads at 18, so we would hitchhike until we were told not to because the IRA was starting to wipe us out. And we would go everywhere. But then it come to a time when you couldn't leave the base on your own. You get charged. So we had to go in twos. And there were other times you couldn't leave the base at all. Yeah, I was posted to Northern Ireland after my basic trainings, as is trade training, in 1970. And I spent a year there. So I left in 1971. Yeah, so while I was still in Northern Ireland, that was my first experience of traveling with the Air Force. So I was sent to Madagascar for 2 months. Now you can imagine wanting to travel. There's me going to Northern Ireland and think I am really traveling. I was. But then they say, okay, we've got some aircraft that's monitoring the area around Rhodesia and all these places. And every 2 months, the engineers would swap over to keep these aircraft going, right? Because they were based out there. So, and it's very typical of when you work on a squadron or work on the aircraft, wherever they go, you have to have the engineers to do the work. So we went out to Madagascar in what we call a Charlie 130 Hercules aircraft. Now I can tell you, I thought my life had come to an end because that was 20 hours of flying in a Hercules. 10 straight hours, and we stopped in Moharek, refuel and carry on for another 10 hours. I was sick for 3 days. I couldn't even stand up talking to the station commander. But the significance of that is when you're the only tradesman there, you have to get the job done. So even though I went to the doctors and he said, Herman, you're suffering from travel sickness. And I couldn't even stand up. He said, go to bed. And as I was climbing into bed, the Land Rover pulled up outside and said, you're needed at work because we don't know what to do. So I still had to go into work and get the job done. And I was able to do that and got back to it. But it was a great experience. 2 months in Madagascar was an indentation in my life that I'll never forget because the people there, so different. It was an education. So you start to learn about people and how much they know, how little they know, their level of living, whether it's poor, not so poor, or rich. And when I went to Madagascar, I started to see that. I also started to learn about people and their culture. What I mean by that is I went out and typical Air Force, we make sure we get a good deal out of where we went. So we only worked half a day, every other day. The rest of the time, there was a bus on to take you to the beach. So I went down to the beach and I'm standing there and the locals heard me talking. And it was absolutely amazing. They just couldn't believe I wasn't speaking their language because 75% of the Malagasys are African descent and 25 are French because it's a French colony. So they expected everyone that looks like them, and i.e. my color, to speak like them. So in no time I was surrounded by all these people listening to me talk And this guy came up to me and said, "You, where are you from?" And I go, "England." He goes, "No, no, no, you know England." And it's just that experience of, I've not experienced that before, where somebody didn't looked at me and thought I couldn't come from England or whatever. And it wasn't until I said I come from Jamaica, then they said, it's Jamaica. And they understood that, right? But there was a learning curve for me to say, we're the same, but we're different in many ways. But Madagascar was fantastic 2 months. I really loved it. After Madagascar, I was posted back to Cambridgeshire, in this case, Royal Air Force, Whitton in Cambridge. And then I was working with a different type of aircraft, in this case, Victor aircraft. Massive, massive in comparison to the Shackletons, which was World War II. Victors were more of a modern aircraft, more modern. And then I think we had 51 Squadron, I think, was there as well. The ones we did out there, can't remember. Nimrods. Yeah. So we had a variety of aircraft on the one base, but my trade worked with all of them. So that was very interesting because there was a difference. And also the type of job, depending on what aircraft, changes all the time. So I was doing different roles because of the different aircraft. So I was at Whitton for a number of time, and I got to about age 20, and they said to me that there was a attachment coming up to Maseira, and I'm thinking, where is that? And it was in Oman. And me, I just wanted to travel, so yeah, I'll go. Nobody else wanted to go. And when I got there, I realized why. It was like just a desert. I mean, like, you don't see a blade of green grass. It's just like, brown and mountainous and volcanic sort of, But it was very good in terms of learning again, because you seen different people again. The ladies, all you could see of a female was just the eyes. Everything was covered to toe in black. And again, when you expose a young person to those kind of things, it's just a learning curve, So I did 10 days there, but it was really very, very interesting, And it was still traveling, so I put a tick in the box as something very positive, really. So I was back at Whitton, and then about after 2.5 years of being in the Air Force, I was sent to Germany, Royal Air Force Gütersloh, and my first experience again, working on Wessex aircrafts and Lightnings and that sort of thing. But while I was there on the squadrons, you realize that there's really, the Air Force is really very powerful in terms of where it goes in the world and what you do. So I used to just travel all around Belgium, Holland, I went to Denmark, I went to Sardinia. So I went from Wessex to Lightning aircraft, and we had Phantoms as well. So you would just get up and go to somewhere for 2 weeks, and you do what you have to do, and you come back. And I served my 2.5 years in Gütersloh, and then I went and I came back. So that was 1972, 75, and I went up to Lincoln, to RS Scampton, where I was working on the Vulcans, 35 Squadron. And that again was another experience, because that's going from, a different type of aircraft, very graceful and all that. And that was a good experience again. Then I left, went back to Whitton, and working again with all these different similar aircraft. I then left Whitton and went back to Germany again in the 80s, where I was working on Jaguar aircraft, on 20 Squadron. And that's, again, where I started going places, because I went to so many different places. Every year we used to go to Sardinia, which is Decima Manu, for 3 weeks, whether you like it or not. Knife, fork, and spoon, everything. We'll take it on the squadron and we go. And you do bombing and strafing, because the aircrew had to learn to actually hit the target with the bomb and also shoot the target. So you would go and do your training alongside many other countries, Germans and others would come and do the same thing there, and you'd work together. So it was a multi-role sort of station. So again, you're meeting so many different people. And then the Italians, of course, being Sardinia, they were completely different culture, believe me. positive and negative, and you know, it was very good. But wherever we went as RAF people, we just got the best out of the situation. Yeah, so going to RAF Bergen and spending, that was 19, I think that was 1982 to 85, and spending a lot of time on the squadron there, again, was a fascinating experience, because when you travel all the time like that, it impacts on the family, and you don't know how much until one day I came back and my son, well, my wife was telling me that my son was having headaches, and when I got back, he said, "I only get a headache when you go away, Daddy." So, you know, but it was a regular thing to up and go. You know, you'd come and you'd back on the squad, and they said, "Right, we're going to France for a couple of weeks," and we come back and you go into Scotland for 3 weeks. And I went to Scotland for 3 weeks, and I came back, and there was a guy waiting at the foot of the aircraft for me to go to Berlin for 4 days. And I said, "When?" And he was, "What is the next day?" You know, and it was rolling on. And I came back from there and I went to Las Vegas for 7 weeks. So the impact of that on your children and your family, and it impacts on you as well as an individual, because you are a family person as well. So when you go away, it's not just the family that misses, you miss the family as well. So it was quite interesting. So I did at Bergen, and left Bergen, and I came back. I came back to Marham, RF Marham, yeah. So I met up again some of those aircraft, Victors and all Canberras and all that. Then they brought in Tornadoes as well, and all of that. And I went between Whitton and Marham, and eventually I got posted to the training school, which is here at RF Gosford. Now I can tell you, when I did my training, I said to myself, if I was ever posted to a training school, I'd leave the RAF. Because I'm thinking, well, that's not what I joined up for, to be a part of this training thing. But my experience of traveling around the world and the experience I gained on the squadron, I was really suited for it. But I just didn't want to believe that. And my squadron leader at the time said that he wrote me this glowing report. When he read it to me, I said, "Who's that about?" And he said, "It's you. You are going." So I took over this training school in, I think it was 1998. I was the training manager for my school. And again, my whole life changed, because that's a completely different experience, where you're now going from an operational unit, which is where I went to spend most of my time, not just an operation unit, but on the squadron, on the front line. This is the Royal Air Force front line. Get up and go. You know, I mean, at times, I remember being at Whitton one day and they said, "Right, we're going." And by 4 o'clock that day, we were in Gibraltar, quite a few of us. And that's a life I was used to. You come to a training school and all that stops. You are managing people. So I came to training school and I had to learn to manage. You go on courses and they teach you, and the courses are not a piece of cake, they're hard. So you learn to manage, because I was in charge of instructors. And then I was in charge of, every month I would get 12 trainees, boys, girls, 16 and a half up to whatever age, coming every month, a new lot. So I had to learn to manage. I think I had about 13 to 20 instructors. So I'm managing adults. I'm dealing with marriage breakups, girlfriend breaks up and whatever, and that's just the stuff, right? And then you deal with trainees who join in the military for the first time. And I'm saying, don't do it, because I did it when I was young, so I know what you're going to get up to, and you're not going to get with it. All those things you've got to learn to deal with and manage it. So I was here for quite a number of years, total 7 years, I believe. And in between that time, it was really a big learning curve, because lots of things happen, you know. The human being is not, you learn about a human being. People will lie, they will steal, and they'll be the best you've ever met. So that right across section. And a standout moment for me was when an airman came in and I looked at his record, because I used to get all the trainees' record when they go to basic training. In this case, it was like Holton. They would be there for 6 weeks, and about 3 days before they arrived, they would send me all their training records, the files, and I would read through each file, the 12 of them, and I have to make a decision as to who was going to be class leader and deputy, and I would just do that from the files. And when I read this one file, you get a mark out of 1 to 6. He had all ones, and that's the lowest. So in my mind, I said to myself, some of those are 0. But at the time, the standards were lowered in the military because there weren't enough 18 to 25-year-olds to supply industry and the military. So the military dropped the standards. And I said to this, my boss, wing commander, sir, this young man will not make the grade because I can tell that they're just pushing him through. And he said, so looking at this young man's file, I just felt, well, with my experience, I just felt that he would make the grade. And it did happen that way. He had a problem in terms of attitude and behavior. Now, I couldn't just get rid of him and that attitude, but also academically as well. So cutting a long story short, what happens is as the boss of the school, if somebody's not making the grade, 2 reasons you come into my office: if you're very good and if you're not good, right? I have to deal with those things. So this young man had to come into my office, and I said to him, unfortunately, you're not making the grade because of what you've done, without repeating what he's done. And when I fill these forms out, I had to tick the box, 2 boxes. 1, retain in the Air Force, do not retain in the Air Force. And I ticked, do not retain in the Air Force. When I do that, that goes up to a board, officers, whatever, and they will judge what I've written about this airman. I just wrote what it was. And they decided to get rid of him. Now that airman, when he was dismissed, the last day that he was on base here, at RF Cosford, he left a message on my answer phone saying, my name, the color of my skin, if I ever meet you, I have got a bullet up the chamber of my 45 waiting for your head. So a quick rewind, and I listen, I know your family live, and I'm waiting for you. Because of you, I've got to leave the Royal Air Force. So I stopped all what I was doing, called my equivalent rank in the military police, and they said, well, we're not being funny, but we've gone off to put you in the guard room under armed protection. So they took me across the other side of the base here, and I was under armed protection, and they found this guy. By that time, the whole of the station was surrounded by civil police, blue lights everywhere. I was then told that they found him, slapped the cuffs on him. They went to his room. He had 2 guns in his room, and there was loads of books on guns, which was obviously illegal. He wasn't meant to have those things. So that's just one of the things that happened here at Cosford. But there were multitudes of positivity, working with people, seeing them come in, seeing them transform from being so within themselves. We would send them out on a course and teach them how to be team members, working with people. And by the time, the training was 10 months schooling. By the time they left, it was like transforming to different people. They were most of them were like that, very positive. Yes. Again, that's a good question, because there were a variety of things that happened, positive and negative. And what I noticed is that people will look at you not necessarily for who you are within, but they just judge you because of the color of your skin. And oftentimes it was negative. So they wouldn't find out what you're about necessarily before they actually put you in a category, and oftentimes that was bad. Also, for example, people would believe that you couldn't do certain things without even finding out whether you could do it or not. And I remember going up the ranks, and as you go up the ranks, the higher you go, the more you are responsible for being in charge of people and indeed the place that you work. We call it the section. So I was in my section once, and somebody walked in and went to the nearest white face, which was the youngest person in, and said, "Where's your boss?" And the person said, "You just walked past him." Right now, I had the ranks on my shoulder, but in that person's eye, I couldn't be the boss because he walked past me, and didn't even ask a question or nothing. So that was just one example. But then you get other times when people recognize you for what you are, and you get recommended, get commendation. People say, "You're doing a good job," right? They were white faces, but they saw what you did and what your capability. The other contrast I would draw is also something that affects you very much is promotion. In the military, the higher the rank, the better it is for you if you can hold it. What do I mean by that? It is monetary linked. So if you get promoted to the very top that you can be, that is the best thing for you in terms of receiving a pension at the end of the day. So I remember being on a unit once, and this gentleman came up to me and he said, "Why are you still in that same rank?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I was on a board and you came top of that board 3 years ago and I was still there. So I lost out on 3 years' wages, which means then that impacts all the way up. So you never catch up the 3 years. So at the end of the years, when you leave with a pension, instead of getting that money that you'd have got accumulative over the 3 years, you'll never get that again." But there were lots of positive. The Royal Air Force was for me more than I expected. What I wanted to do, far more than what I got to do. I got to travel all over the world, which I didn't think I would do that. I say to people that I went to the University of Life because I learned so much about people from Denmark, Norway, Sardinia, USA, all over the world. You just learn differently from people. So it's very educational from that point of view. So my departure from the Royal Air Force, I'd done the maximum really, because I'd done up to age 55, because really and truly, you're not meant to go beyond that. A lot of people do, but it's like on a yearly basis. So I'd done the contract of 55 years, and I then left. And prior to leaving the Air Force or the Army or the Navy, the military, they will provide you with some sort of course, depending on what you want to do. And they will send you on that course, even if it's in Australia and that's the only place, they will send you there to do this. So they look after you very well. I wanted to have my own chauffeuring company, so I was sent on a course to get the higher level of qualification in driving vehicles and all that sort of thing. And I set up my own executive chauffeuring company, and I did that for 16 years. And that was fabulous because I said to myself, I just couldn't go and sit in an office after traveling all these years all over the world and just sit in an office day in, day out. It wasn't for me. So I was still traveling. The only thing is I was traveling just in UK, so it narrowed it down to that. But I found that very good in terms of my customers. I wouldn't say anything until they asked me questions about my background. But once I started talking to them, sometimes they used to give me big tips for entertaining them because of the places I've traveled. And some of them will be going on holiday to some of these places, and I will say, "Oh, I've been there. They want to know why." So I tell them. So that became very good. And they kept saying to me, "When are you going to write a book?" Which eventually I did write a book about, So yeah, I did that for 16 years, and I stopped that during COVID because all flying had stopped and all that sort of thing. So after that, I set up my own organization. So I stopped my chauffeuring company during COVID, and after that, I started my own organization called the Forgotten Generations, which is a CIC. Now, the reason for doing that is that I looked at my life wholesomely, and I thought, what happened to me as a young child in Jamaica must have happened to lots of other people, not just in Jamaica, but, And I started to look at that and I thought, that's an interesting thing. But I wanted to be a bit unique, so what I did was look at what happened. I put a big question mark in between. What happened to the kids who were left behind? What happened to the parents that traveled to whichever country, in this case, UK? And I thought, why don't I interview them and find out what sort of journey they've had? And it's been very interesting. Then I obviously say, I'm in military, so why don't I look at the military side as well? So I started looking, obviously nobody left in World War I, but I still would like to get information about people who served in World War I. But more interestingly, people are still alive in World War II, and that's what I do a lot of, and I've done a lot of, interviewing these World War II veterans, some of which have passed now, but I've got their story, live recording of their story. So that has been extremely good, because I've linked with quite a few of these veterans, and marvelous stories. And for me, it's an honor to be linked with those people who served for us and paved the way and made us free, basically. And I go around the country with my organization, the Forgotten Generations, and I do talks in schools, faith groups, churches, universities. I do research with universities based on African Caribbean experiences. And I say to youngsters when they ask, life is what it is, and you need to grab it by the scruff of the neck. But what I really want from my organization is to show them people who have achieved, those people who have not been highlighted in life, so that the youngsters, they say seeing is believing. So if they see that there's people who look like them who have achieved certain things, and African and Caribbean people have achieved a great deal, but a lot of it is not written anywhere. Hence the name Forgotten Generations. So highlighting all these things has been amazing. And we're getting more and more invites into all sorts. And myself and a veteran got called to number 10 Downing Street. We were invited to the Queen's Jubilee big lunch. And sitting there having eats and things in number 10, we got tapped on the shoulder and we were given an award, the Points of Lights from which is a prime ministerial award. I think that started in 2012 for the work we're doing with the Forgotten Generation, the community. That was quite a surprise, and I was with a veteran when that happened, so that was fantastic. Well, first of all, I'll be very biased and say join the Royal Air Force instead of the Army and Navy. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't be biased at all. I would explain to the individual that it is very much the armed force, and do you really know what is it you are joining? So therefore, try and get as much information about what you would want to do and find out how it's done. If it's done in the same three forces, how it's done, how it's different. So they go in it with the educated rather than blind. Because a lot of people join the armed forces and they get put into a category that they knew nothing about. I knew nothing about my particular trade when I joined. So I'd say to them, yes, I'd encourage you to be, because the life in the military is really very, very good, or can be very, very good for an individual. But you have to toe the line. It is not something that, you can take lightly. What I would say to them also is that, and I get asked these questions sometimes, I do talks around the country, as I think I mentioned before, and some people say to me, why should I join the white man's army? Now, when I hear a question like that, of course I'm thinking, what are you saying? Because a lot of these people are born here. They didn't come here like me. So they came here like me, I could probably understand that question, but they're born here. So I say to them, are you free? And yeah. Do you want to stay free? Yeah. I says, well, we have a nation to defend. Defending that nation would need the military, the army, the navy, the air force. The nation is made up of you and me. We're not talking about color now. We're talking about people. I said, to keep those armed forces going, the armed forces need you and me. You are intertwined in the fabric of the nation, whether you like it or not. It's here for you to defend. You're defending yourself, you're defending your mother, you're defending your father. So it's not the white man's army, it is your army. So if it's you as an individual that want to do that, longing, like myself, go and do it. Just find out about it. Be educated about it. Find out what you want to do and make sure you can get to the very top of what you want to do. But it's your army, it's your navy, it's your air force. Because you live here and you need to defend your people. So that's how I say it. So yeah, I would definitely encourage people to join, but with an open eyes and ears. I mentioned Northern Ireland before. This is a Northern Ireland campaign. So I served in Northern Ireland, like I said, 1970 to 1971. So I did a year there. I was still 18, and they chased me all around because I was traveling that much to give me the medal, because I didn't even know anything about a medal. So that was my first experience of getting a medal. And each medal is actually annotated right in the bottom there with your name and your rank and your number. So it's yours. The second one is 1977, the Queen's Jubilee Medal. So I was serving then, so I was fortunate as one of the people got that medal. This other medal now is long service and good conduct. That's the label they give it to it. Not everybody gets it, because that bit good conduct, a lot of people get charged. When I say charged, you do something wrong and they will charge you, and depending on the nature of that, as to what you did, those things are on your record. So if it's bad enough, you will not get the conduct. So you've done the service, but you won't get the medal because it's together. I got this twice. So you did 15 years, and because I did 36 years and I did another 15, so the bar on top is another medal. So that's 2 medals in one. And serving in Germany, I did a total of 5 years in Germany, different times. So ich kann ein bisschen Deutsch sprechen. And because you learn the language. I love languages, so I learned German, just to speak German. And then this one is the King's Coronation Medals, which you're allowed now as an ex-military person having served. That one is the Veterans Medal, which obviously I've been a veteran for all this time. And then you've got the Cold War. Now the Cold War, obviously, between Russia and us, and I served some really, even though it's peacetime, I served some really tough times in Germany where exercises, 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning, whatever, you get called out of bed and you got to grab your rifle and go. It was like real. So they call that the Cold War. So that's why I've got that on there.